So let's talk about what an extra expense is. Obviously, many businesses that have a business interruption are going to incur expenses over and above normal. However, this is a defined term in the policy as well. The policy defines extra expense as meaning the necessary expenses you incur during the period of restoration that you would not have incurred if there had been no direct physical loss or damage to property covered by or resulting from a covered cause of loss. And what's that mean? So essentially, when you're looking at extra expenses, if there are expenses over and above normal that are used to reduce the business interruption so that it can operate during a period of restoration, then that generally would be covered under this part of the policy. There are other types of extra expenses. There may be pure extra expense, and there's also expediting expense.
So let's talk about some of these different types of extra expenses. And we mentioned the expediting expense. And a good example of this would be if you have a printing press. A lot of the machinery comes from overseas. A lot of times it's from Germany. And if you have a fire at a printing press and you need to reduce your the time period to get back up in operations, you may have a replacement printing press expedited. So typically that's more in line with the property damage portion of the policy and not necessarily the business interruption. But that's one example of an expediting expense. Now, pure extra expense is going to be similar to what we have with this policy, with the exception that a pure extra expense does not have the same restrictions on in order to save on the BI. So in other words, we can spend more than $1 to save $1 with a pure extra expense, where in this policy and the extra expense must serve to reduce a BI loss, we have that limit where we're not going to spend $1.50 in order to save $1 in the business interruption. Now, it is just important to note that the pure extra expense is a totally separate policy. I believe that's a CP0050. So where you're dealing with a CP0030, we have the economic limit. CP0050, we do not have that same limit, but it's a separate policy in and of itself. So circling back to our policy here, we're dealing with extra expense which must serve to reduce the BI loss. So there's some common examples that you see a lot. So in the case of an off-premises power situation where your business is not getting power, what you end up doing though is you rent a generator and you fuel it in order to power your business so that you can operate during the time period that your power is out. So that's one type of expense. So another common example would be if your business has a fire and you decide to go out, you're trying to mitigate your loss, and what you do is you go rent temporary office locations or a temporary structure. Now you might be operating at reduced capacity, but you're mitigating your loss, and that's generally something that these policies would respond to. So in that case, your efforts to rent your temporary location and operate at reduced capacity would serve to reduce the BI loss. Therefore, that would be something that would be covered under the policy, generally speaking. So as a measurement, that's what you're always looking for when you're looking at extra expenses. So that, of course, was a real general overview of extra expenses, but I hope it gives you a little idea and some clarity about how they work.